Test 1 2 3.
Ready to record. Get finished my mustache. It's getting too long. Hello, everybody. You know, when we think of soccer, we picture the folklore of kids kissing a badge, the drums, the chants, the tears, the last-minute goals, all that emotion that makes the game feel so mythic. Is there a word like that, mythic?
You just created it.
I just created it. This is what we do here. But behind all that beauty, especially in American youth soccer, there's got to be a machine. There's a machine that needs to survive. And you know, if you think that's simple, print a few shirts, design a cool FC logo, grab a field and coach, and boom, you've built a club, which is obviously what I thought. We're not even close.
Payroll, facilities. You gave me all the good stuff. Scheduling, curriculum, pathways, budgets, college prep, retention. All of this with almost no government support, no municipal infrastructure, and very little trickle-down help from professional clubs. In the U.S., you're basically left on an island to build it yourself. It's emotional for families, but it's operational for clubs, especially the ones who do it well. And the tension between those two worlds defines the entire experience.
Now imagine the landscape when Noah Gins first stepped into it. If we think it's chaotic today, the early years were even more unstructured, fragile, filled with mom and pop's program that could barely survive 2 or 3 seasons. We know kids that moved from clubs that collapsed one after the other. It took actual visionaries to bring stability to that world, to start stitching it together and put real systems in place. Without people like Noah, I don't know, we'd still be stuck in that short-lived experiment instead of this long-term environment.
And that brings us to today's guest. Noah Gins is one of the people who transformed chaos into structure.
You know, on field, Noah was a player. He held the shape, right? He was the one who read the moments, connected lines, kept the game coherent when everything around him got really frantic.
Yeah, I mean, Noah, he creates stability, he builds systems, he brings clarity to an ecosystem with 3 million youth players and only 0.4% reaching Division I college soccer. He wants the system to evolve, but he's brutally honest about what a functional environment actually requires and is focusing on providing the best experience and developing the best players possible.
Yeah, and results speak for themselves. What he's built has given thousands of players something they wouldn't have had otherwise. Structure, opportunity, stability, and most important, longevity.
Let's get into it. Conversation with Noah Gins.
Finally, you're so excited to have me shut up already. Hey, Noah. Welcome to Chasing the Game. We're so excited to speak to you tonight. Before we get into today's soccer landscape in the U.S., we'd love to start with your background as a youth player through your college and professional career.
Thanks for having me, guys, and excited to share everything I can with you today. I have had a youth career, played club soccer, played on the youth national team, went through the whole ODP system, state, regional, national. That was around U16, 17. Got a scholarship, went to play for UNLV, Division I school, full scholarship, played there for 2 years, transferred to University of New Mexico, played there, and then by design, finished my 3rd year there and went into professional soccer in the A-League, played 9 years in the A-League.
It's amazing. Well, we're excited to get into how much the landscape has changed since you were coming up. And, you know, a common theme, actually, ODP has come up multiple times on our pod as a lot of our guests have gone through the system as well. So we're excited about that. As we get into it, Noah, when you started with Albion 20 years ago, I believe you had 6 teams in one market, which was in San Diego. 20 years later, talk to us a little bit about what Albion Nation has become and some context around the numbers and the overall philosophy.
So it's been 28 years, actually, that I've been sitting atop Albion here. I was playing professional soccer in San Diego organically, got asked to help out a girls team within Albion, which was a very small, nonprofit soccer club that really was borderline recreational, but had 6 competitive teams, helped out a girls team. And that's where it started. Ended up taking on the organization, and in short order, doesn't feel short, but it was about 6 years where we started playing and competing for our first national championships. As the club in San Diego grew in quality, naturally with quality, quantity came. It was never an ambition to be the biggest club in San Diego, but it was an ambition to have the best quality, develop the best teams, the best coaches, have a curriculum, develop national team players, develop pro players, and certainly college players. So as San Diego grew in notoriety, organically, Albion grew. And it's probably around, I think, 2007 when someone knocked on the door and said, hey, can we be Albion? And at that moment in time, it was a reflection of like, why would we do this? And it was the person standing across from me that I said, you know what, I want to help this guy. I have a lot of respect. I see he needs help. He's doing really good things. He has really good teams. And I started to kind of see what he saw. There was a lot of equity in what Albion was doing locally, regionally, nationally. At that time, I think we had played in maybe 3 or 4 national championships. A lot of attention was around the boys and girls side at that time that was doing well. So we ended up allowing them to brand Albion, and it was then time to help that club. And I think at that time there was a lot of learning lessons in terms of how to support someone that's representing your brand. We're extending that. There's a lot of risk associated with that if they take that and don't do well with it. So anyways, we could get into the details and the weeds of that particular club, but that was the start of it. And pretty much for about, I would say 3-4 years to follow, there was several other clubs that organically knocked on the door. So Albion was steadily growing, but both in San Diego and other markets, California and beyond. And then as we kept going, we got to really understand that there was responsibility that was far more than what we were giving to the affiliates at that time, which revolved around the internal resources that were employed just for affiliates, human resources, as well as programming and coordinated support. So the period of time now, if we just kind of rolled it all back, it's been very methodical over the last 5 or 6 years to help support, to help grow, and to have a North Star, which is really to advance the game, support as many leaders and clubs and markets that make sense, that have synergy around player development, want to be the best in the market, but need support. And we are truly aligned in being able to help that.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but soccer, I'm assuming youth soccer was a simpler environment then when this whole thing started. I mean, maybe it was less structured, but what did you see that was missing that allow you to shape Albion into what it is today? Or is this just something that's organic?
I mean,
what was the
I got to
vision
tell you,
behind
I
that?
spent the better part of my career thinking about organizational excellence every year. Like, how do you get tighter and tighter and tighter organizationally to be able to grow, to scale, to think? We think about player development, and if you go wide, how do you support player development? A lot of clubs think about leadership, and maybe there's one person leading the boys and one person leading the girls. I have tried that. I've looked at that. I think there needs to be some seniority maybe in those positions. But when we were building Albion, I looked at it like our 8, 9s, and 10s that are growing and developing, they need leadership from a programming, from a goals and objectives, the KPIs around player development at 7, 8, 9 years old. So we brought structure and leadership to that. Then it became what is 11 to 14s and 15 to 19s. So I spent a good part of my early days just like eyes wide open, looking at the landscape, realizing that as a young director and a former professional player that was coming into coaching and leading club soccer, there was an assumption that everybody had a curriculum and everyone was organized. And when I got into the industry and went and traveled and met and looked and evaluated, it was clear there was nothing in place. It was just teams being coached by good coaches, and success was usually a byproduct, not necessarily a formula to that success. So there was an emphasis to really get organized. First as San Diego, like, how do we master organizational excellence? What's the model of leadership? What's the way? This is a business. So if it's a business, it has to be run like a business. That means you have professionals running departments like finance, like marketing, like HR. And if you don't have those, then you can't really run an organization on all cylinders. So I spent most of my time thinking about that. If you think about it, most youth sports are more mom and pop type organizations. There's resources. There's not enough resources to build it out. So heavily invested in that, ran a very lean organization, but put everything back into the organization so that we could have the most organized, structured environment. And I think when you think about what's missing, like that was missing. The whole ecosystem of youth soccer, the large majority was missing that organizational excellence. And ultimately, on the other side of building out San Diego, that is what we're trying to support and accomplish for all of our affiliates.
And as you're growing into this, the structure was meant to build professional players, or was this a recreational system meant for kids to have a place to train in, like you said, maybe an organized fashion where you could almost franchise or replicate it? I mean, because you said the mom and pop, right? I mean, I grew up where soccer is a very emotional sport. You play for a team, you play for a logo, but you're talking about something that's a little bit different than that, right?
I think at the end of the day, you're building an organization to support all players. The recreational player that's entering the game for the, entry of love and exploratory. You're also building a pyramid of player development. So you start at 8 and you end at 19, and you go off to college, you go off to pro. We want to be the vehicle for a player to advance as far as they can go and as high as they can go. So it's meant for all the players, but if you have only a rec side, then all of your top players have to leave. If you have only an elite side, all those other players have to leave. So we're there to support, and a true player development model is one that at 10 years old, that 10-year-old on the third team could be the best player in the US by the time they reach 19 years old. That's a reality. Or could be a Division I college athlete, or could be, the best player on the team. So it's really important that you have the model and support that allows a player to develop at the rate and the pace that they're at versus it's a one size fits all.
I want to share some numbers. Jump in here and make sure that I'm accurate with this, because there's only so much we can scrape from the internet. So approximately 15,000 players are part of Albion Nation today. Is that correct? And which is incredible. How many markets are you?
We're about close to 30 markets now. Yeah. It's coast to coast. If you go up and down the East Coast from Florida all the way up to Delaware, we're all through there, and we're not sitting here in every state and every market, but when you look at the map, we're pretty much across the country, coast to coast.
It's incredible. And the boys and girls side, so boys, you're playing MLS Next, you're playing in EA. There's obviously the rec leagues you just mentioned as well. And then the girls side, you're in.
Yeah, I mean, we have, I would say, clubs that are in all the platforms out there or have been at one point or another. On the boys' side, MLS, ECNL, EA are the primary leagues that we play in. I think over the period of time, it's not like a formula that it has to be one way or another. I think it's certainly market to market. It's certainly opportunities where those opportunities come for different leaders and clubs. But I would say the majority of the clubs are in the EA and MLS, as well as Girls Academy.
And then for some amazing numbers, I think I saw that over the years, Albion players have been awarded something like $55 million, and hundreds of players have gone on to play in college. A number are currently playing in the pros, and something like in the mid-30s or so that have played for the U.S. national teams.
Those numbers sound about right. I don't have them exactly in front of me, but I know that we just hit a milestone of 63 million. It was 55. I think it just moved up to that. I know there was a couple announcements most recently. We just had over 100 players in the last 5 years since MLS Next was formed and created. 100 plus players have been signed into MLS academies and first teams. I think there was 4 or 5 on the first team level currently. So a huge player production from Albion into MLS Next and MLS Major League Soccer. So super proud about that, with obviously players in USL as well as overseas.
Yeah, I think what strikes me about that is when we go back a few minutes ago to the beginning of the conversation and you were talking about organizational excellence and the business aspect of it, right? And treating it like a business. Some people may hear that and think, yeah, this is the problem with US soccer. It's a business, it's a business, it's a business. But then when you talk about the results, it's clear that player development is at the forefront of all of it. And it's not just lip service, right? It is, how do we serve all of the players and then figure out ultimately the best pathways as players develop. So what an incredible journey that you've been on.
The mishaps is if you say business, somehow you think of making money, and business, it means that you're operating professionally, right? You're professionally running an organization with professionals. I think that's probably the most important aspect of it. because a lot of the businesses are nonprofits. So it becomes like, when you think about, when you say it could be a problem that it's a business, like, how do you pay for coaches? How do you pay for fields? How do you do all the things necessary to be the best and provide the best training and overall resources? You have to pay for that. It requires resources. So I think that's the most important piece, is being organized to be able to operate at that level.
I mean, for me, look, obviously I'm a little bit slow. That's why I'm done this podcast, so I can get free education. So here's the way I see it. United States is massive. Obviously, parents get it, people get it. It's an incredible amount of variety of socioeconomic levels, sports levels, needs, styles. I think of Europe. Let's say you look at England, you look at London, can have hundreds of teams around London alone. It could be over a dozen or maybe 20 youth teams. Here it's spread out through this enormous land. You cannot tell me it's the same soccer that's played out west, or maybe in North California is the same that's played in Mississippi, that's the same that's played in New York. And if it is, how does that even work?
It is different around the country, only from the standpoint of there's the weather restrictions, there's the environmental influences. It could be where some of the players are coming from, where the heritage, South American, Mexico based. I think that influences the type of soccer. I mean, a lot of times the way the game's played is the way that the personas are, and I can remember in the early days, we would take Albion teams, early 2000s, we would get them out of San Diego bubble and bring them back east to play against what I would call tougher mentalities, just not as technical, but definitely had more grit, had more determination, had more variety of type of players. You had European, you had Africans, you had all sorts of flavor and flair on the field. And if you just played in your same bubble, you saw kind of the same type of play and players. And so I would agree. I think you were making that point that around the country, it's such a big country and it has diversity around in every which way, which impacts player development. And also California, we play 12 months of the year outside on perfect fields and perfect weather. And you just don't see that around other parts of the country. So they have to train differently. It looks differently. And as a result, you see a different type of player.
So you adjust the program specifically. For example, you couldn't take your program now and just move it to Europe. That wouldn't work, because Portuguese soccer is not the same as French soccer. And within France, there's 10 different kinds of schools of soccer.
No, I mean, listen, first of all, from a player development and style, we're not so structured that everybody's got to play the same way around the country inside of Albion. It's more about our North Star. It's more about our pathway and support and organization that gives the players the pathway and the resources. I think the mistake would be that we say, hey, you got to play this way. It's got to look this way. Coaches need freedom. Coaches need autonomy to think about how they want to play, think about what players they have to even play a certain way. I think the North Star is the commitment to development. It's the character of each person. I think in sport, you don't go far without character. Talent only gets you in the door. I think character is why players make it. And I think that is true to all of our leaders within Albion. That's the most synergistic element of what we do. There are curriculums built into Albion. There's resources, there's coaching education, there's all sorts of things that support it, but it's not meant to be a one size fits all. So you could take us as coaches and players and put us into any nation. You'd have to adapt to the environment and the style and also the culture. I think coaches that come from outside the US, they have to adapt. They have to adapt to how the American system is, the parents, the pay-to-play model, the business in which you have to fit into, which is very different than the rest of the world. So I do think we could go play soccer, though. If you just put us on the field with Portugal, we would be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you do it all the time. Yeah. So you could say, so there is an Albion team, let's say, that builds from the back, and then there's an Albion team somewhere else in the nation that directs.
And to be honest, it's probably dictated by the game. That's not the starting point. I don't think there's too many individuals within Albion that's just going to come out and that's their first priority is to go be direct. But I also would say if they're finding success, okay, no problem. It's probably because of the demands or the players or what have you. But it's also one thing that I think, without us not being naive, we're trying to develop players. We're trying to develop teams to go win a game. So then it becomes, what does the coach see? How do they see the necessity to go win that game in front of them?
Hey, Noah, can we pivot slightly? So parents often mention being confused by pathways, leagues, whether it's MLS Next or ECNL or USYS or EA. On the girls' side, there's a couple of different leagues, and we're not even getting into the grassroots. Could the U.S. ever develop a truly unified development framework? And if so, what would need to happen for that to happen?
I think anything's possible. I would say that you would need to have extremely incredible leadership at the top to be able to accomplish something like that. And leadership that...
So when you say at the top, I think this is also a part of confusion, at least for us, and I'm slower than Laurent. So,
and someone exists that's slower than me.
Is that U.S. soccer? Is that MLS Next? Is it ECNL? Right? I think that seems like it's part of the challenge. What is U.S. soccer's role in all of this at this point?
I mean, in the hierarchy, U.S. soccer is at the top of everything. That's at the top of everything by just organizational structure. So there was a point in time not too long ago that U.S. soccer controlled all of youth soccer at the elite level. That was clear. So when I think about the alignment of all the different leagues, it would have to be U.S. soccer saying, hey, this is a great move for everybody. And you'd have to have incredible leadership at that level. And at that level, we would need all the leaders of each league to be... The only way to bring it all together is that they would be built into that vision and they'd be part of that vision. Not, hey, this is the vision and all your good work. Because there's a lot of really good people doing really great things. And there's been a commitment for years and years to help shape soccer in this country. And those leagues played a massive part. So there's no guarantee that anything that someone would be throwing out there would be successful or be the magic answer. But you'd have to get full adoption. You have to get everyone bought in, and then those leaders would need to be part of the team. So I think you got to build a team of people that say, "Hey, we're going to do this together." It can't just be top down, and you try to do it with just one voice. It's got to be a collective voice, a collective sort of bargaining power to bring it all to the table.
No, I think we just nominated you.
Yeah, and what he's saying is there is a chance. There is a chance.
I think we can all agree that probably in our minds that something like that makes sense. And then, you could argue, does it wash it all away? Does it make it vanilla? Or is there a secret sauce in having competition? Or, it's hard. I think you have to get in a room, but again, I think it goes to really, really strong leadership that is inspirational, that is motivational, that is also has clear, tangible North Star to it for everyone to go, this is what we get to do together. Because again, there's been a lot of hard work done by a lot of people, and I don't think is just going to go, yeah, no problem. Take what I've done, and you can just do whatever you want with it.
I mean, just the numbers alone, like Albion, as Matt mentions, is a massive amount of trove potential for talent because it's just the numbers themselves. You have a lot of kids. So what we found in some of our interviews, there's always kind of, you hit this wall where, and correct me here if I'm wrong, if you develop a player that goes to a pro team, at the end, except for the tuition that you got through the years of that player from the parents, or maybe a scholarship, maybe you didn't even get tuition, there's no more financial compensation that Albion will get from a player going pro. So the success doesn't trickle down and allows the fertilization of the ground level, right? We call it grassroots, but we're not putting anything in the ground from the top. There's no rain coming down. Am I missing this, or is this an actual thing?
I'm so glad you're bringing this up. It's been a discussion. It's been a vision. It's been certainly on my mind and other for 20 years, honestly. And I think the discussion that was always brought to me, or questions that were brought to me, even from the novice or non-soccer person, was, how are we going to win a World Cup? Or how come we don't have a world-class player like Ronaldo or Messi? We have athletes. We know we have structure. We know we have resources. I think that when you talk about that, you could look at the structure, the coaching. I think there's been a really strong emphasis to develop coaches better in this country. I think our coaches are getting better every day. Better coaches makes better players. So then you start to think about, well, what's the process? And most leagues, if not all leagues, you're playing with one emphasis is to win a trophy. You're playing to win the game. And there's always a conflict or a debate around.
Unless you're MLS Next.
Right. Youngers, right? Youngers.
So you're 13 MLS Next. Then we don't talk about winning, but otherwise,
But
yeah,
listen,
you're absolutely right.
The conflict
Laurent, we're going to
is
start finding Laurent every time he
Yeah,
was a
people
quality player.
debate, can you develop and win? Or, if you win, do you sacrifice development? So, for me, the biggest statement that this country could make if we want to develop is to reward development. Just reward it. So if you develop a player forward, reward it. And if you change that, if you made it so that every coach in this country and every club that was trying to pay their bills and support their organization, if they knew that if they developed a player forward, that they could earn money, now, guess what? Everyone's putting resources to development. Everything goes to another level. And to me, it's so simple, but yet we haven't figured it out yet. And the rest of the world has. The rest of the world is compensating clubs, supporting clubs, investing in clubs to develop players. So when I mentioned earlier, if we've developed 100 players plus in 5 years, just 5 years, into pro academies, and out of those, we have X amount that are playing on first teams. If that money came back, that money would be reinvested into the club to do more and have more resources. So, I think there'll be a time when this happens, hopefully in my lifetime, that we get to develop a player, earn money back, reinvest. That reinvestment maybe, allows us to financially scholarship 10 more players, or build a better field, or, get the lights that are needed to light the field up, or hire that nutritionist or that sports performance coach that will enhance player development. You just get it. You can see it. You get to recalibrate everything with that. So I guess the dream is that we get there. That is the dream. I think that if we want to develop truly this nation, that is the easiest thing we can do, is just the easiest thing is to recognize. You get recognized, because recognition also fuels it, but then you start to compensate. That takes things to another level.
And if you need me to make some calls,
Please.
I'll be happy to do it. I know tuition can only get so far. So, all right, after this immediately.
Let me ask you, Noah, is there a world where, whether it is private equity making investments across the platform, it's a sponsor, whether it's Adidas or New Balance, where they're footing a bill, for example, across X amount of clubs and then getting a clip for players moving on, which would then take the pay-to-play basis down?
There's obviously money pouring into the industry for different reasons, and from pro to youth, for sure, and everything in between. But I think you're onto something there. There's probably some organization around that particular model of player development, and if the investment came in and you could lower the fees, get rid of the fees, so there's no barrier into. But I got to tell you guys, most organizations break down the barriers of fees. Like if a kid wants to play soccer, they will play soccer, and we then will find the resources for them to play soccer. And so we break the barriers down regardless. The pay-to-play model is necessary to operate because there's no other funding coming from places except for registration and from fundraising and that sort of thing. So to your point, if money came in and you said, all right, that is going to be the resource for these players, the return of investment is that these players are going to now be in a position to sell them. The thing is they got to be signed professionally to sell them, right? You got to have them under contract. There are FIFA governed player compensation fees and different things that are technically supposed to be awarded when a player makes it to a professional team. So those are things that I guess could be built into this. But I think nonetheless, you got to have resources to come into any ecosystem to bring the fees down, for sure.
And beyond, I mean, again, these are themes that keep coming back in our interviews. Is now you have supplementary trading, so you have a whole secondary market, which again is not free. For I don't know if it's FOMO by parents or is it really kids needing the extra work, but there's a whole secondary market now, and this is a market that's outside of Albion, right?
I think it has a place only because if you're a coach coaching 11v11, you have 18 players. Not every kid is going to be individually addressed. So kids are hungry, parents are hungrier sometimes, and you have probably a need to address that. I've always looked at it like there's in youth soccer, we have a responsibility to develop the full player. And I think that we have a strong emphasis on technical superiority. And I think most often, if you're doing a private, it's on technical training. So I believe that within Albion, we address that because what we end up doing and what our focus is that for typically the first 20, 30 minutes of a session, you're addressing the individual and you're addressing it on a technical level. And through that technical training, there's repetition. And if you're doing that every day and every week and every month and every year, it adds up. And those players become technically advanced. They master the areas that we're training on. I think that we address a lot of that, but there are players that are behind in areas, their right foot, their left foot, they need extra. I know that it's an ecosystem where people recognize that, and there's people that jump on that and capitalize on it and have side hustle, side businesses. And I think there's some really great trainers out there. There's also, maybe people that are taking advantage of an opportunity.
When you talk about the curriculum and you were talking about the individual player, I actually got to overhear when we met in Brooklyn a few weeks ago, I overheard you talking to the technical director from Brooklyn, and they were literally discussing how many juggles, I think it was like a U8 or U9 player needs to be able to do with each foot. So here's a guy who's leading, a massive club nationally who was in the weeds talking about how many juggles should each kid be doing at that age with each foot, which was incredible for me to hear that you were that focused. And in this case, Kyle was that focused. How do you ensure there's enough touches? I think that's where parents start to get concerned in team training that there aren't enough touches. And I think that's also a question of, is that just parents being neurotic, or is that is that a thing, right? Where there just isn't enough touches to go around. And I guess, sorry, this is a long question. The other part of this is also consistent with what we've talked about. Kids aren't playing pickup as much as they used to because of their incredibly structured lives. And how do those two things come together?
I mean, I think every player needs to have a foundation, and that foundation has to be measurable, has to be measured. It has to be tangible. I think for parents to see at a young age that their player is developing. And so we've always discussed it and looked at it that there's some technical areas of the game that are tangible and there are measurable. And it also drives a few things. Number one, when you're talking about juggling, as just one example, it gives the player at a young age a chance to fall in love with the ball and fall in love with the game because they can get some immediate gratification. They go from 1 to 5 and 5 to 10 and 10 to 50. And when they make those jumps and those progressions, the player's joy and the player's belief in themselves goes to another level. When the player gets to 100 and then gets to 500, what that is telling everybody is that the player is, number one, technically getting very comfortable with the ball, and also is very dedicated. Very dedicated. They're working on their own. They're spending time with the ball. So those little triggers end up translating in other areas that are on the field and off the field. And by the way, translates to the school and the boardroom and all the other things, right? So there's a lot of people that devalue juggling. We value it because of the tangible things that it does for the player. And so also, like, mom and dad get a chance to say, my kid is improving. Like, what are the other areas that, without it being measurable, you can kind of see maybe they have a good game, they score a goal, they running better. There's some things to the eye, but when it comes to player skill development, technical abilities, we want our players to be technically sound with mastery. So juggling, skill moves, Brazilians, these are 3 areas. And so, yeah, the conversation we had in Brooklyn was in and around somewhat the why, really, making sure we have the why, and then some of the tactics behind it.
I'm curious, we talked quite a bit around specialization, multi-sport. What's your view on it? How have you approached it in your local markets as kids have come up? How much have you seen it change? If you look at a player today, vis-a-vis a player 15 years ago at 15 years old, if they've committed themselves fully, where are we at with all of that?
It's a great point, Matt, because we just had an interview with Ben Olsen and a couple more, and each one of them who went to a pro career like you always talked about playing multiple sports at a young age, and we just don't see as much of that.
It's a tough one. I'll say this. I mean, I played at a young age. I played baseball and soccer, ultimately chose soccer around the age of 13, 14. I was a better baseball player then. And then once I fully committed, within 2 years, I made the national team. And then the rest was history. But when I think about the last 28, 29 years of coaching, I don't think there's many players that have made it at the highest level without being all in with their sport. Like do I think it's healthy? 100% at a young age. Do I think that it's good for the player and to experience other sports at a young age and then also develop different skill sets that kind of translate? I do think it's helpful. But I do think because of how competitive things are, how structured, and also it depends on the goals of the player. If it's an elite player, if a parent and a player know that they want to go elite to the elite level, once they know that, they should be all in. They should put all their eggs in that basket. If they're not, if their objective is to play high school soccer and maybe play college, maybe there is some cross training, maybe there is cross sports, but it also, I think it goes back to, the player, the love of the game, and what are they really good at? Let's take a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, 10-year-old. I think you can be exploratory in those ages within reason, with a commitment level to the respected teams. I think we are teaching discipline and commitment and winning ways at a young age that need to translate young and move into their early teens. But so commitment of training and being there, they got to be there. But if they can do multiple sports and do that, or seasons, but once you get to like at 11, 12, 13, you're talking about elite pathway, you got to be all in. It's kind of how it is in all sports, I believe.
Does Albion follow the U.S. soccer pyramid as you see a player structure? Okay, your goal is slowly to progress towards MLS Next, for example?
It's structured to put players into a system that has a clear trajectory to move towards the college or pro level. And the vehicles to do that are not one-dimensional. Like you can be in various leagues and get to the same result. You could play in a local league and make a Division I soccer school. There's nothing that says, you got to be in this league to get to there. If you were to go interview a Division I college coach, they're going to say, I don't care where this kid comes from. I don't care what league. I don't care what club. I do know that I'm going to go shop Albion because Albion has top players. I do know I'm going to go shop out MLS Next because they have top players in that league. Like, there's going to be a fast track for people, but they also know if someone's knocking on their door or they see a player that they see can play at their school, they don't care what league is in. It could be in the local league, but it's just one of those things that the players got to make it there. So I think that's where the vehicles of a club like Albion or leagues can help you get there, but that doesn't guarantee it. What guarantees it is you have the talent individually. And so for us, the model club is not that you have one team in every age group. You have multiple teams at every age so that a kid can develop at the rate that they are developing, and players can move up and they can move down in order for their development to take place. But that trajectory from U8 to 9 to 10, all the way to 19, where is a clear North Star that if you want to play college, you want to be a pro, you want to be a national team, you're aspirational, this player development pathway will help you get there.
You mentioned the word elite a few times, and we've had this conversation amongst ourselves, Laurent and I, and amongst some others. It strikes me that we use the word elite very broadly, and it seems like it causes some issues in the system. And what I mean specifically by that is if you take MLS Next homegrown players, everybody by definition on a roster of 18 is probably considered elite. And what I mean specifically by that is they miss their high school experience because they're committed to their MLS Next homegrown team. And with that comes a whole different social experience, right? And I would argue a very different experience than club. I'm not saying it's necessarily better, but it is very, very different. How do we think about that? Do we need to think about that differently in the future and how we define it? I mean, it's very clear that there are certain kids that shouldn't be playing high school because they truly are elite and they're on a trajectory, whether it's to a top Division I school or it's hopefully to go play pro. But for the others, where it's not as clear, you see that as being somewhat of a challenge today.
I do. I think it's super controversial to some degree. At the same time, I mean, U.S. Soccer, created this model when they created the U.S. Development Academy and created a 10-month season and wanted everyone in a consistent environment, wanted to control the number of games they were playing. There was I think a clear model that U.S. Soccer wanted these clubs to follow and these players to benefit from. And I do think it worked. I think it worked in the context that, it wasn't the Wild West. Like players were in an environment that was consistent, day to day, week to week, month to month, year in, year out. You had that player pathway. And I do think that was one of the best things that happened to soccer in our country. Now, on the other side of that, you've got different models. You've got leagues that allow it, other leagues that don't. And I think that because you have that, then now you do have a little bit of like a la carte for a player. They can kind of choose, like, if I want to play high school, I'm going to go play in this league. Or in MLS now, you have two divisions, one that you can play high school and one that you can't. That's a pretty good situation because now there are players that, high school is really important to them, and or it fits that model for that market, for that club. And so you can kind of flex that. But the non-high school player, to your point, like there's players that they want to just be in that environment. I also think if a kid wants to play high school, they should have the ability. And so I think that exists now, which is built into several leagues, which is, I think, really important.
Yeah, so I guess conceivably, if the kid is good enough and they're playing on their MLS Next homegrown team, but decide they want to play in high school, they play in high school, and then come November 1st in the East Coast, I'm not sure how it works the rest of the country. I know it's different when high school soccer is played. If they're good enough, then they could potentially make their way back onto the homegrown roster and play the remainder of the year in that environment.
I think it's club to club in terms of like maybe
how you've seen it?
Philosophical approach to that. There's different ways to do it. You can start out in AD, Academy Division. You can be a player that floats between AD and HD and homegrown and plays on both teams and then goes to high school and then sort of comes into the roster that is most suitable. But I don't think you can go start in HD, go play high school and come back to HD. That's not something that is allowed from a league standpoint, and most clubs will not allow that because that just kind of kills the integrity of that. You allow one to do it, everyone can do that, and then you slippery slope. So, but I think there's ways to structure that for certain players that are trying to participate in both.
You brought the magic word, parents. We haven't even talked about parents yet. And when I think about this complicated system, this is what's unique about this interview is you actually have it all. I mean, from all the ages, the levels. I imagine then there's this giant HR department that deals with just parents' communication on every level. Because one of the issues we always find is that a lot of the parents, many of those we didn't even grow up with soccer or understand the sport in a way, are learning it all in real time. And there's usually a lack of communication from a team on a trajectory of a kid, except for something as simple. You can say, well, a kid's going to be good or bad. Do you have kind of a mantra on how you communicate with parents? Is that something on how you see Albion is this part of the philosophy of Albion or
parents at the youth level are so important. I think parent education, parent communication is essential to success. You've got to get the parents cued in, knowledgeable. I mean, parents are, business professionals. They're people that have been through life. They run their own businesses. They're doctors or lawyers. They're people. They have podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, just incredible
but
people.
If you position the parents, it's almost like a negative persona. Whereas like these are your people that you can educate and get on the same page, and they become your greatest supporters, and they help in so many ways with the resources that they have. They make for great sidelines. They spread the message to the players. They speed up player development. But when it's not utilized, everything I just said goes away and everything becomes harder. And I try to really work with parents through our leaders to make sure our leaders and coaches and our clubs are customer orientation. They're customer centric. They're thinking like this as a customer service business, because when you do that, you do want to listen. You do want feedback. You do gain from all of that. So every club we have an approach to surveys. We have an approach to communication. We have an approach to really, really being open to the feedback necessary to do a good job. But again, it does go down to how do you structure the year from the beginning to the end. Parent education starts at the beginning. It's when they first sign up, your first team meeting. How is that run? How is it organized? What are the things you're talking about? All of that becomes a major part of Albion in the context of building out the best environment.
That
100%.
sounds exhausting. That is definitely, yes, I'll give you credit for that. That's a pass. Parents, check.
Noah, I'm curious, you mentioned travel before, how it's influenced what you've built at Albion. What markets in particular, or clubs or academies, name it, have influenced the development in the curriculum
that's a
that
great
you've brought
question.
to Albion? And how often do you get overseas to revisit some of that?
From 2000 to 2016, I literally was in Brazil every single year. So massive Brazilian, South American influence. And during that period of time, that's when Brazil was the most dominant national team. The individual players, the way they played, it was a spectacle, right? Like that was it. And we weren't chasing that. It was just, at that time, I was connected to individuals that were connected to CBF, the federation down there, and wanted to open up the doors there. And we were, 2000, I started, 98, 99. So a couple years into it, and was thinking about how to differentiate our player development model, and started taking players, hundreds and hundreds of players a year down to Brazil. And as I was doing that, that influenced me. That influenced my curricula, and how they played is how I wanted to play, but I didn't understand how they played and achieved it. And so going down year in, year out, that was my quest. And during that period of time, I also started developing a team, and that team became one of the main catalysts of pushing Albion forward. That team won everything there was to winning youth soccer. I think on one team, we had 4 U.S. national team players. Several went pro. Tonight, Ari Lassiter will play in a match against San Diego FC in the deciding game, and he was on that team as an example. So there was a lot of influence coming into that team from the years of Brazil. And when I think about that, it was the movement, it was the interchanging movement, it was the movement off the ball, it was this freedom to play. Players move, they're not stuck in positions. And I think that time it was clear most youth soccer teams are like, you're a defender, you stay right there. You stay on the right side. Whereas this Brazilian game was so interchanging, and it gave so much freedom. And the South American flair of freedom and their spirit was something that we wanted to adopt. And so there was a lot of things we did, a lot of things. Since then, it's changed. Now, from about 2016 or so on, everything's been in Spain, with some sprinkled in Portugal, England, that sort of influence, if you will. But Spain, and mainly with playing in big events over there, and just developing relations and culture in Spain.
So I think about Brazilian football culture. I think about Spanish culture. I think about unstructured play. I think about kids playing all the time, that the kind of the rules of the schoolyards run supreme. You play different ages, different skill levels. You're all over the place. This is realistically not something we have here. Do you think that's an issue?
I do. I think you can create, I think our coaching knowledge doesn't say, like, go to that. It doesn't say, hey, let's create players of freedom. Let's create those type of players. It's sort of like, built on a lot of structure here. We're built on, and I think we're afraid of that environment a little bit because it feels too free. We're not going to get the gains from it. So I wish we could have both. I wish kids could just be kids and just go, if they were mandated, like every Friday, just go be a kid and play on the streets. But Monday to Thursday, you're going to be in this professional structured environment. And then Saturday, Sunday, go explore the game and try to have the balance of it. Because you see nations, right? You see nations that are pretty free and they don't always produce the best results. Individual players, everyone wants that type of player, right? They want to, you can't have usually 11 of them. You got to have one or two of them that bring that special freedom and characteristic of creativity. But I would say, again, it's like it kind of goes back to also that player compensation model, because if we are all thinking about developing players versus winning a game, we would probably want to see those, we'd look at the player model differently and how we train the players. And now it's like, I'm going to develop this player and this player and this player, and you guys are going to go over there and you're going to be, work on all the creative moves in the world and repetition, and or you're going to create an environment that brings that out a little bit more. But it's not an easy question for me to answer. I do know we don't have enough unstructured, free play in the world of U.S. soccer.
When you look at the youth players coming through today, take one of your MLS Next homegrown teams in San Diego, you're closest to, or elsewhere, and at the U15, U16 level, and then you think about 10 years ago, have you seen significant change in the player, the ability, the mentality, and then I guess the last component of that, with the use of phones and social media and the amount of time that kids spend on devices, how do you see that creeping into the mentality of a player?
Well, I think as it relates to the social media and all that, I think it's become an versus we mentality, which is really hard for coaches to build culture of we and team. So you're definitely dealing with that on a much bigger scale. I think everyone would probably agree there's probably a bit more grit built into teams of the past. I feel like our players have it a little bit too easy now, or easier when it comes to the environment. Everything is pretty perfect in some ways versus, the imperfect is what, builds strength and resilience and fortitude and all the key ingredients to maybe us winning a World Cup, or you winning a national championship, or a player making it and not making it. So I think when everything is just perfect, there's no variables, whether it's the field or, the type of games or whatever. I remember early on in the U.S. Development Academy, almost every game felt the same because everyone was playing the same system, playing the same. You literally walked out and everyone was 4-3-3. And there was a feeling of like, this is really weird. There's no chess going on. There's no, it's just very vanilla, because everyone felt like that sort of a narrative, a directive of like, everyone's got to play this way. And it really kind of sabotaged the creative juices and the competitive juices. And it did feel like we were missing the elements of competition. So I do feel like because everything's so fragmented, everyone's in different leagues, you never really know who the best of the best is. You don't really feel the pressure of like what it used to be. So I do think that's a concern.
Yeah.
When you look at Albion as a system, and I mean, you deal with kids all the way, you said to U18, or what is, if you have to kind of simplify, but what is a benchmark for success for you and for the club, and except for somebody going pro?
Laurent, do you mean that from a perspective of a kid has come through the academy, they get to U19 and then they're off to college?
No, it could be as simple as a kid staying there 4 years, or it could be somebody going all the way through. But how do you define what something successful is? Is it just, okay, the tuition is paid for the next year, or is there something else that you see that is greater than that, when is kind of a philosophy of the club?
I mean, I think the success is definitely measured in many ways. I would say, the the fruits of our labor is seeing players make it. Like that is what I'd say most coaches and the club gets excited about, is when we see individual successes and we move a player through the ranks and they get picked up by a national team. They go to college, they make it to pro. Obviously there's a percentage of those kids, but that is definitely a milestone and a success KPI. But also I think the development of the player is really important, but development of the person is equally as important. So I think, a success to us is that players want to come back year in and year out. There's a level of retention. And through that retention, you get to see these players grow and develop and blossom. And some of these players go on, and the things that they're doing beyond soccer are far more important than anything we're talking about today. So I think that is also a key measure of success. I think when we know our true North Star is working is when development is happening, results are happening, retention is happening, and recruitment's happening. Those 4 pillars are truly what we look at in terms of success. It means that we're doing all the right things. And there's, again, tangible and measurable built into all 4 of those pillars.
So is it essentially in some market better to have a youth winning team that wins a lot of trophies, but what you would consider is not playing beautiful soccer, but kids want to be there or parents want to be there because this team wins a lot? Maybe that's very appealing. Or is it more important to have a team that plays a certain style or beautiful soccer, even though it comes at the cost of winning
I don't think
games?
I would never prescribe to, hey, let's go win ugly. Let's go do anything for the end result only. I think that it goes back to success. What does success look like? It means that we're developing the players, getting results as a team, and there's retention. Like we all know in the world of sport, you could win and lose all your players. And then you go, what the heck happened? What happened is you have bad culture. What happened is like it had nothing to do with winning. So you don't want to win and not have culture. And culture is tied to retention. And so again, that results, the development of the players, there's tangible. If we're developing players, let's go back to the basics. The technical superiorities, seeing the measurable elements of the technical that are built in. That's very simple, but that's tangible and it's measurable. The retention is how you go from one year to the next year. And I think success would be like you start with a group at U8 and a large majority of them graduate at U19, right? Beautiful. That's an amazing feeling. And then imagine those kids then go off and represent at the next level. And then now you're going to their wedding in, 5 years later, and, then they come back and coach for you. Like that is the most successful formula. Wow. That, and by the way, that's happening now. Been around long enough that's happening.
I love it. Why don't we finish with where we started? Because I know this is top of mind for a lot of parents as their players and as their kids get older around the college process. You as a club and you as an individual have had incredible success helping players find their way to play in college at all different levels. How do you think about it? How do you structure it as Albion? And then what would you share that's most important for parents who are either getting to the process or thinking about the process for helping their kids position themselves to have a place to play once they wrap up at the club level?
$63 million in scholarships is definitely not by accident. There's definitely a intention and an emphasis put on that process. We've always looked at it as it's in our control. It's our responsibility. It's not anyone else's. And when I say that, there's always this perception that you got to be playing at certain events. You got to be doing certain things. You got to be in certain leagues. And sometimes that's in your control and sometimes that's out of your control. If a team in a market doesn't play in a certain tournament or a league, does that mean they're not going to play in college? 100% no. It's in our hands. So I would say that the things that we do are intentional. We've invested in technology that supports each and every player to be able to navigate and model what's important to them to play at the next level, to prepare their researching, to be able to communicate to colleges. It gives them all this technology that just makes it easy for them to navigate. We spend a lot of time educating the players and the parents on the process, starting when they reach the 9th grade year. We go through all the details of each division of college soccer because it's so different, to get them educated, to get parents and players educated. There's a myth that if you're a top player, you have to play at D1. Well, there's top programs at D2, D3 over the country, right? And even in AI. Every player is different, and every player, I think, has a different course action when it comes to their college roadmap of recruitment. So we have a national program where we have college directors that support all of our affiliates. We have college directors at each club. So they are constantly working together to bring that education to the families and to the players. As we follow a pretty robust and detailed script of, you're in your 9th grade year, you're in your 10th grade year, in your 11th grade year, and here's the things, and here's what we're doing. But what I'd say to a parent is that if a parent relies on one else but the player and themselves, I think they're making a mistake. And what I mean by that is, like, if you just go, well, we're at Albion and we're going to go to X tournament, that's all I've got to do, it's nowhere near enough. And the most important person in the process is the player. Like, they have to be the most active. They have to be the most involved. They have to drive the process. They have to knock on coach's door. They have to knock on Albion's directors, Albion's college directors. They have to knock on doors to say, hey, help me, or what do you think? Or here's my schools, or really be the proactive. And then they need to be the one emailing college coaches, following up with college coaches, being assertive and aggressive with their coach recruitment, because most people think, well, they're going to get recruited. That's how it works. And it's really the other way around. You got to go recruit the school and the coach that you want and showcase yourself in a different way, whether it's on the field or off the field. It could be the way you converse with them, could be the way you communicate with them. It could be the way you warmed up, it could be the way you played, but you have to be proactive in that process. So when we get our players together and start talking about college process, this is where we're at. And so parents have to buy into that and really push their player. And again, it's so competitive, and if players aren't driving that process, it probably something that isn't for them to begin with, because you got to really want it. And so you got to drive that process in a detailed way.
I mean, it's so strong.
Awesome.
I'm still inspired by that little comment you had in the previous question about the kids who become coaches, who kind of circulate through the system. And to kind of almost wrap it up, I imagine Matt and I, 10 years on, we'll probably be on episode 6 by then. And I'm calling you back for an interview. What is your long-term vision for Albion, or, U.S. landscape soccer in a
10
way,
years,
10
yeah.
years
Yeah.
from now?
I mean, I think I'd like us to, the way we started the conversation with San Diego, the operational excellence and refining things to a point where just sharpening your pencil, you're sharpening the blade of excellence every day in one environment. I want to see us do that nationally, to where, if we're doing the type of numbers we're doing in college or pro academy, that Albion those numbers continue to rise in player development and the impact. And because we're sharpening everything inside, everything becomes stronger, that it becomes more defined, it becomes more tangible with the results that come from it. And we'll continue to scale that ultimately to a place of, I would say, national dominance in a way of player development. And hopefully by that point, 10 years from now, Albion could be one of the biggest reasons U.S. soccer is where it will be. If it's winning World Cups, if it's feeding the pro system, there's a good chance that Albion will have its own pro team in that ecosystem that then is feeding pro soccer, because we are able to develop players through our own pro system and then put those players into MLS or international. So I think in general, it's just the standard of excellence that permeates wider and wider and delivers, truly the best results out there.
It was fantastic. It's exactly where I see the podcast is in 10 years. So you've taken all the words out of my mouth. Look, I hope parents, coaches, whoever listens to this appreciates not just your time specifically, but your work and really how much information has been shared in the last hour and a half. And this idea of clarity, I mean, I feel like I've been just taken to school right now, and I feel 2% smarter.
Which is actually a huge increase.
Thanks. I feel like no room in the head anymore. Noah, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
We appreciate all the work that you've done across the country to help develop players, not just as players, but as people, which is really clear as part of this conversation. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon, my friend.
Sounds great, guys. Thank you very much.
Ooh, we always do that after an interview, but I feel this one really deserved it because, man, my brain is about to explode. I gotta be honest, though. This is the first interview that I actually didn't want to like because I love complaining. I just love it. And if I was running this and I would do that, and this is different and that's that. But after speaking to Noah, I just realized really quickly, if I ran a club, it would fall apart in about 6 minutes, just like this podcast.
Here we are. And that's the reality. In this country, there's almost no government support, no municipal infrastructure, and almost no trickle-down help from pro teams. You're on your own, and somehow Noah has kept environments alive, stable, and moving forward in a system that makes that almost impossible. Much of that, I'm sure, to do with the people he surrounded himself with.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine like all the memories that Noah's created for these kids and families, and just not flashy guy, but it's all about foundations and fundamental, and thousands of kids have found opportunities because of that.
Yeah, we all romanticize youth soccer, the wins, the losses. I mean, for you, the draws, the dreams, the heartbreak.
That's me too.
And we all, myself included, love to complain. Oh, man, why you wrote this again?
You don't want to keep reading your thing? Okay, fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Oh, want me to read it again?
Okay. We don't have to. It's not every line here is not gold.
But after this conversation, maybe next time, we'll give a little bit more grace, because the amount of work it takes just to keep these programs running and successful is enormous.
Yeah, I mean, you come to realize that without people like that, fighting these battles, the logistics, the finances, all the operations, it's just U.S. soccer as we know it for youth would just not exist in a meaningful way.
Yeah, if this episode gave you clarity or helped you see the system from a new angle, share it with a soccer parent, coach, or teammate. This is how we all get smarter together.
Full videos on YouTube to Matt's chagrin, audio on Spotify and Apple Podcast.
Thanks for chasing the game with us.
See you all next week.